Hello, friends. Uh, my topic is financial inclusion and sustainability of banking sector. In this topic, the question comes in my mind: does it require financial inclusion? The question's answer is affirmative. Yes, it is really required financial inclusion. Even after 70 years of our independence, many people they are living away from the main development, and that people should be incorporated in the financial system, and that is really needed. And for that, the what is the need of banking sustainability? Banking sustainability is really needed because to give the credit to that people those are not in the development, those are not the part of the system, they should be part of the system, and then we can have comprehensive social development. And for that, the stability of banking system is really needed. We know that the banking sector is a severe threat because the NPA, that is non-performing assets, it crossed the 10%, more than 10%, around about 10%. So definitely that is not the good sign of healthy system, and that should be understood, that should be addressed from the government side. And because of that, then we can implement good financial schemes for the social development. We know that in the history of in India, nationalization of private banks in India. Let's go back in the history. In on July 19, 1969, 14 private banks were nationalized. And in 1980, six private banks were nationalized. And that moment we shared, that was a watershed moment because that was the first step for the financial inclusion in India. And because of that, at that time, we celebrated it a lot. Uh, and because and what happened, what were the reasons behind the nationalization? Indian rural financial system was marked by the domination of landlords, money lenders, traders, etc. Because the entire system was under these people, and because of that, the credit flow was not being reached at the concerned people, and resulted that there was a disparity, visible disparity across the society. And because of that, that may be the reason. Second reason is the financial inclusion of people, because financial inclusion is required. And that is why we can say that system is required. And we know that this system, let's see, some problem, financial inclusion to provide rural credit, and that was the main reason behind the nationalization. After the nationalization, what happened? We know that effects laid by nationalization. As a result, the number of rural branches increased from 1,833 it was the figure of in 1969 to 35,206 in 1991. So there we can see effects of the nationalization in this procedure. And second, the concept of priority sector lending was introduced. Means after the nationalization, the government has suggested banking system provided some guidelines. A concept of priority sector lending was introduced. Means the credit flow should be reached at the agriculture sector of India. That credit flow it reached to the various field, and that things was there. Then all banks had compulsorily set aside 40% of their net bank credit for agriculture, micro and small enterprises, housing, education, and weaker section. That was the remarkable, and we can say it was a revolutionary step to sort out disparity from the society. Third point, we know that a differential interest rate scheme was introduced in 1974. Here, loans were provided at a low interest rate to the weakest among the weakest section of the society. And that was the first step to remove poverty, and their credit flow should be reached those people. They are not the part of the development. Then fourth, the lead bank scheme was introduced in 1969. Each district was assigned to one bank where they acted as peace setter in providing integrated banking facilities. Lead bank system was introduced, scheme was introduced in 1969. Fifth, the regional rural banks were established in 1975 to enlarge the supply of institutional credit to the rural areas. Sixth, National Bank of Agriculture and Rural Development was constituted in 1982 to regulate and supervise the functions of cooperative banks and RRBs. The outcomes of such multi-agency approach were admirable. The share of institutional sources in the outstanding debt of rural households increased from just 16.9% in 1962 to 64% in 1992. Though we can see the cascading effects after nationalization. There were many mechanisms introduced by government. What resulted in that impressive growth of financial intermediations. The share of bank deposit to GDP rose from 13% in 13% in 1969, and it rose to 38 in 1991. The gross saving rate rose from 12.8% in 1969 to it was in 1990 21.7%. The share of advance GDP rose from 10% in 1969 to 25% in 1991. The gross investment rate rose from 13.9 in 1969 to 24.1 in 1990. And this we can say, and we know that in financial liberalization after 1991, we accepted new economic policy, liberalization, privatization, and globalization introduced in Indian economy. On the recommendation of Narsinha committees in 1991, RBI allowed banks to open closed branches as they desired. Means some sort of restrictions came out after the recommendation of Narsinha committees, and that was the smallest blow for the nationalization of the banking sector. Interest rate regulation on priority sector were removed. Means earlier it was mandatory for banking sector to have a priority sector, that. 1 minute. Interest rate regulation on priority sector were removed, because that binding has removed, and even the bank can start their business at anywhere if they wish to start their business at any place. So that was the independency, financial independency assigned to the banking sector. uh, and then because of that, because of this report, because of that restriction eased, The outcomes were immediately visible. More than 900 rural branches closed down across the country. The rate of growth of agriculture credit fell sharply from 7% per annum in the 1980s to about 2 per annum in 1990s. The retreat of public banks wreaked havoc in the rural financial market between 1991 and 2002. The share of institutional sources in the total outstanding debt of rural households fell from 60% to 57.1. The space vacated by institutional sources was promptly occupied by money lenders and other non-institutional sources. Uh, and This kind of freedom it got to the banking sector, and ultimately we have seen this kind of visible impact on banking sector. And then government thought it is not proper to go with financial liberty, and there should be some target for provide credit to all rural as well as urban. So again, policy of 2004 doubled the flow of agriculture credit within 3 years of announced. In 1991, we know that some sort of financial independence assigned to the banking sector, but we can see the very regressive impact on the sector, especially in the financial corporation incorporation of the people. Then 2011, the RBI further tightened this procedure. It was mandated at least 25% of new branches were to be compulsorily located in bank and bank centers. So as a result, the number of rural banks branches rose from that we can see 30,646 in it was in 2005, and it rose 33,967 in 2011, and 48,536 in 2015. The annual growth rate of real agriculture's credit rose from about 2% in 1990s to about 18% between 2001 and 2015. Much of these provisions of agriculture credit did not go to farmers. It largely went to the big agri business firms and corporate houses located in urban metropolitan centers, but recorded in the bank books as agricultural credit. Uh, and we know that in 2007 there was a global financial crisis. Most of serious financial crisis up after Great Depression of 1930s. Lehman Brothers, that was the biggest bank of United States of America, it collapsed in September 15, 2008, and that was a subprime mortgage crisis. It is known. And in India's bank sector survived from this financial crisis. The reason was that the nationalization of banking sector, as we earlier seen, that particular impact, and because of that, only ICICI Bank affected badly in that crisis. The same public banks were also uh, India's vanguard during the global financial crisis of 2007, when most markets in the developed world dominated by private banks and collapsed. And uh, because of that, conclusion, uh, we survived banking sector in 2007. So the question comes, what is the conclusion? Unflinching and unwavering support from the government is needed for the banking sector. If government really want to incorporate all these people, that small business, some small scale industries, socially economically vulnerable people, then that banking sector should be sustained. And we need to rewire our rotten banking structure for the comprehensive social and economic development. So India has a disparity because rich became richer and poor is becoming poorer. So that is the reality of India. And we know that agriculture sector is a backbone of the Indian economy. If you bypass these things, then definitely there will be not a comprehensive development of the society. And because of that, we can understand, if we neglected this sector, we cannot have that kind of development, because uh, let the technology advance, but we cannot download roti from the Google, because we want a roti, and it can be ripped, it can be cultured in agriculture sector, and that is to be identified. India is an underdeveloping country. Even India has reached on the moon, is planning to go on Mars, but still, in some part of India, there are a severe malnutrition we can find, and many people, they don't get food on time, and because of that, at the same times, when we India's spacecraft was reaching on the moon, at the same time there were many people, they were struggling for their survival, their sustenance is under threat. So that is the reality. And therefore, bank nationalization has been eased rural credit and aided for financial inclusion. Any move to reverse it would be self-defeating. The goose that lays golden eggs is being killed. The many people are now suggesting that these public sector banks should be privatized. My dear friend, it is, if you say the ICICI is the biggest private bank in India, you just find out their network, you would find that the most of their business is being run in metropolitan cities. If you want to go in rural India, in real India, then definitely that public private banks are required to reach there to provide agricultural to provide credit. So definitely that disparity uh, we have to be sort out, we have to be eliminate. So this is about things. And definitely, even though there are many people says that uh, in NPA is NPA national, then non-performing asset is being increased regularly, but they are willful defaulter, and ultimately that they are rich, they have close affinity with the people of government officials, and because of that they don't dare, even they have capacity to pay back, because but still they don't pay back, because they have close nexus to the politicians and administrative officers. So it is duty of India, it is duty of government to protect these banks for the sake of social development, and that is the part. And this references and work cited, this entire presentation is based on this article, economic milestone and poignant anniversary. It was published in the Hindu in 9th August 2019. All the references and material I have collected from these sources, and these are there. And finally, thanks a lot. So this is about financial inclusion and banking sustainability. So I hope you have understood the things, and will have some clarification, and you will get the